My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors. I can't stress how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and she's thoughtful. She's also always been a no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I love horror, and she was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we shut it off. She also isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks, as far as I know. It's not her cup of tea. That's fine. But what's also so strange about this, it's just so unlike her. I should also add that she's never had any mental health issues as far as I'm aware. It doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I would have thought I'd seen something by now. Some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning, and I knew I wouldn't be able to run the Dunkin' Donuts for my usual fix. I took a sip, and I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging on the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did, however, burn the shit out of my lips. "Jeez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught, and I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird and just totally out of character for her, like I said, but I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo as I shut the door behind me. I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. By the time lunchtime rolled around, I had forgotten all about it, and when I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around like 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island with a jug of OJ in my hand when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with these wide, unblinking eyes, and she was grinning like a Cheshire cat. I screamed, I admit, not out of irritation, but for some reason, at that moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking on the tile floor as she'd hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood frozen in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did, and when I got back to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure that she was really asleep. I had a feeling that she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was so soft and deep, I was starting to wonder if I dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee. "You were peeking at me again? From over there?" I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze and looked back at me. She just burst out laughing. She laughed so hard I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that?" I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was trying to be silly and trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd peek out from behind the couch or the living room curtains. Once, she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might have not even known she was there at all had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. I mean, she had the lid propped up just enough so you can see only half her face peek through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. And when I finally found my voice, I asked her, why on earth was she doing this? She didn't answer, but she slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. It boosted her mood. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think that she was done with her prank, and I felt relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile, and she said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything at that moment, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking, and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around a corner or behind a door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and kinda crazy. But after another few weeks without incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then, a few days ago, things got so much worse. Then left to go visit a friend, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple video games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m. I hopped in the shower, and I was washing the soap from my hair. I began to feel that awful feeling again, that I was being watched, and I slowly opened my eyes, and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking at me behind the shower curtain. Her entire head had stretched into the shower, leaving her body just outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth just hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed obviously, and I jumped back against the wall. Didn't move, and her smile was unmoving. Makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. For a few moments we stood like that. Neither of us said a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled the head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself, at least, as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly I heard a muffled sound and I pressed my ear against the door. Grinning to listen, I just couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. In that moment, I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house and made it to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. I waited for her to apologize or call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan, and then just silence. I couldn't hear a thing. Lynn? I called out, not being able to hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just slow and heavy breathing. I swear to God, just fucking stop it! I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, anything I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before. There was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't gonna spend the night hiding in my bathroom. I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I truly didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. Finally, I stood up, my hand hanging over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. Slowly, I turned the lock with shaking fingers. I was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. Another moan, louder than before, but this time, I was able to tell just where it came from. I turned my head to the closet door, as if in slow motion, and I locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still as wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in this most grotesque, gaping smile I had ever seen. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. And then a short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, that sent a shiver throughout my entire body. I don't know how, but somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I can all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and my phone from the table. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting any closer. I didn't even bother shutting the front door. I drove away from that house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time from either fear or a cold. I can't remember. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called me 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. Upon reading that, I lost my cool. I threw my phone at the dash in rage. I was furious at her nonchalant attitude. What the fuck was going on with her? My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. And Chris lent me some clothes and had asked what happened. I told him a lie. Told him Lynn and I had had a fight, but didn't get into details. I didn't want him to think that I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so furious all the time? This was definitely not what I'd had in mind. I tried to sleep on the sofa, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time, it made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, though. All of Lynn's smiling face. I'd woken up just as the sun started to rise. I just felt drained in general. I knew I'd had to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word. She'd never do any more creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me.